Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, April 6, 2025. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney meets U.S. President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office for what the president calls a very friendly conversation. The president is asked if there's anything the prime minister can say that would make him lift tariffs on Canada, and he replies no. The prime minister is asked about the president wanting to make Canada the 51st state. The prime minister is saying Canada will never be for sale. House Speaker Mike Johnson addresses reports of internal Republican divisions holding up the budget reconciliation bill, while House Democratic leaders are looking to pick off a few Republicans who might oppose cuts to Medicaid or nutrition assistance programs to block the bill. Senate passes a repeal of an EPA rule regulating air pollution from tire manufacturers, sending the bill to the president to be signed into law. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem testifies before a House Appropriations Subcommittee about deportations and Real ID, the enhanced ID for domestic flights that takes effect tomorrow. Republican Senator Thom Tillis says he will not support Ed Martin for U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia because of Martin's work to try to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election that led to the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. And Tillis not supporting the nomination does put that nomination in jeopardy. And in the Middle East, President Trump announcing the Houthis in Yemen have agreed to stop attacking shipping in the Red Sea, and the U.S. will therefore stop attacking them. Right before the Canadian Prime Minister arrived at the White House, President Trump posted on Truth Social concerning trade and tariffs. "I look forward to meeting the new Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney. I very much want to work with him, but cannot understand one simple truth. Why is America subsidizing Canada by $200 billion a year, in addition to giving them free military protection and many other things? We don't need their cars. We don't need their energy. We don't need their lumber. We don't need anything they have other than their friendship, which hopefully we will always maintain. They, on the other hand, need everything from us. The Prime Minister will be arriving shortly, and that will be most likely my only question of consequence." And in the White House Oval Office, one of the first questions from reporters was about President Trump's continuing references to making Canada part of the United States.
Mr. President, and Mr. Prime Minister, I'd like to get your response to this too, but Mr. President, you have said that Canada should become the 51st state. Were you joking?
No. Well, I still believe that, but you know, it takes two to tango, right? But no, I do. I mean, I believe it would be a massive tax cut for the Canadian citizens. You get free military, you get tremendous medical cares and other things. There would be a lot of advantages, but it would be a massive tax cut. And it's also a beautiful, you know, as a real estate developer, you know, I'm a real estate developer at heart. When you get rid of that artificially drawn line, somebody drew that line many years ago with like a ruler, just a straight line right across the top of the country. When you look at that beautiful formation when it's together, I'm a very artistic person, but when I looked at that beauty, I said, that's the way it was meant to be. But, you know, I do feel it's much better for Canada. But we're not going to be discussing that unless somebody wants to discuss it. I think that there are tremendous benefits to the Canadian citizens, tremendously lower taxes, free military, which honestly we give you essentially anyway, because we're protecting Canada if you ever had a problem. But I think it would really be a wonderful marriage, because it's two places that get along very well. They like each other a lot.
Well, if I may, as you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, you know, Buckingham Palace that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership and what we can build together. And we have done that in the past. And part of that, as the president just said, is with respect to our own security. And my government is committed for a step change in our investment in Canadian security and our partnership. And I'll say this as well, that the president has revitalized international security, revitalized NATO, and us playing our full weight in NATO, and that will be part of it.
And they have, I must say, Canada is stepping up the military participation, because Mark knew, you know, they were low, and now they're stepping it up, and that's a very important thing. But never say never. Never say never.
President Donald Trump and the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney in the White House Oval Office. From ABC News, Trump and Carney's high-stakes talks on Tuesday come as the historically friendly relationship between the U.S. and Canada has become strained due to Trump's tariffs and takeover threat. Carney's visit comes on the heels of his election win to replace Justin Trudeau that was fueled in part by his anti-Trump platform. After his victory, Carney warned Canadians Trump is trying to break us so that America can own us. That will never, ever happen. That was from ABC News. More from the news conference in the White House Oval Office.
To clarify, Mr. President, is there anything the Prime Minister can say to you today to change your mind on tariffing Canada?
Tariffing cars?
Tariffing Canada. Is there anything he could say to you in the course of your meetings with him today that would get you to lift tariffs on Canada?
No.
Why not?
Just the way it is.
On the 51st state, if Canadians don't want it, would you respect that?
Sure, I would. But this is not necessarily a one-day deal. This is over a period of time they have to make that decision. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, if I may. Respectfully, Canadians' view on this is not going to change on the 51st state. Secondly, we are the largest client of the United States in the totality of all the goods. So we are the largest client of the United States. We have a tremendous auto sector between the two of us, and the changes that made have been helpful. 50% of a car that comes from Canada is American. That's not like anywhere else in the world. And to your question about is there one thing? No, this is a bigger discussion. There are much bigger forces involved, and this will take some time and some discussions, and that's why we're here, to have those discussions, and that is represented by who's sitting around the table.
See, the conflict is, and this is very friendly. We're not. This is not going to be like we had another little blow up with somebody else. That was a much different. This is a very friendly conversation. But we want to make our own cars. We don't really want cars from Canada, and we put tariffs on cars from Canada. And at a certain point, it won't make economic sense for Canada to build those cars. And we don't want steel from Canada because we're making our own steel, and we're having massive steel plants being built right now as we speak. We really don't want Canadian steel, and we don't want Canadian aluminum and various other things because we want to be able to do it ourselves. And we, because of past thinking of people, we have a tremendous deficit with Canada. In other words, they have a surplus with us. And there's no reason for us to be subsidizing Canada. Canada's a place that will have to be able to take care of itself economically. I assume they can. I will tell you that Trudeau, when I spoke to him, I used to call him Governor Trudeau. I think that probably didn't help his election. But when I spoke to him, I said, so why are we taking your cars? Why are we taking we want to make them ourselves. I mean, I said, and if the price of your cars went up, or if we put a tariff on your cars of 25%, what would that mean to you? He said that would mean the end of Canada. He actually said that to me. And I said, that's a strange answer, but I understand his answer. But no, I mean, it's hard to justify subsidizing Canada to the tune of maybe $200 billion a year. We protect Canada militarily, and we always will. We're going to, that's not a money thing. But we always will. But, it's not fair. But why are we subsidizing Canada $200 billion a year, or whatever the number might be? It's a very substantial number.
President Donald Trump and the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney in the White House Oval Office. More from the ABC News article about their meeting. A 25% tariff imposed by Trump remains in place for Canadian goods that are not compliant with the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA, as well as a 10% tariff on Canadian oil imports and 25% tariff on all cars, auto parts, steel, and aluminum. Canada's retaliatory action includes a 25% tariff on vehicles imported from the U.S. that are not compliant with USMCA. In March, Canada imposed $21 billion worth of retaliatory tariffs on items like American orange juice, whiskey, peanut butter, coffee, appliances, footwear, cosmetics, motorcycles, and certain pulp and paper products. Canada also has a lot to lose if Trump follows through with threats to impose 100% tariffs on films produced outside the U.S. That was from ABC News. After the Oval Office meeting, the Canadian Prime Minister held a news conference at the Canadian Embassy in Washington. He said they had very constructive discussions with the president, and they'll meet again in the coming weeks to talk more. President Trump also said during the Oval Office meeting, when asked about trade talks with other countries, he said, think of us as a super luxury store. We don't have to sign a deal. They have to sign deals with us. They want a piece of our market. And he also said the U.S. is losing nothing by not trading with China. On Capitol Hill, his Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent testified before House Appropriations Subcommittee and gave an update on trade talks that are underway.
Let's fast forward a year. Where do you see the U.S. with respect to tariffs and the overarching strategy? Do you anticipate all trade deals being bilateral, or could there be multi-country trade pacts of which groups of countries agree to a tariff schedule?
Mr. Chairman, this will be path dependent on our trade partners. As I've said before, there are 18 very important trading relationships. We are currently negotiating with 17 of those trading partners. China, we have not engaged in negotiations with as of yet. So I expect that we can see a substantial reduction in the tariffs that we are being charged, as well as non-tariff barriers, currency manipulation, and the subsidies of both labor and capital investment. So that is proceeding very well. Many of our trading partners have approached us with very good offers, and we are in the process of renegotiating those.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, questioned by Congressman David Joyce, Republican of Ohio, chair of the Appropriations Subcommittee that held today's hearing. Story from CNN, American consumers are on the cusp of tough choices because of President Donald Trump's trade war. Ships now pulling into U.S. harbors from China are the first to be subject to the massive tariffs that America is imposing on most Chinese imports. Many of them are half full. That means in a matter of weeks, consumers will face higher prices and shortages of certain items. That was from CNN. More from the hearing with the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Congressman Mark Pocan, Democrat of Wisconsin, asked about who pays the tariffs.
Who pays tariffs?
Sorry, well...
Who pays tariffs?
Sorry,
Mr. Secretary, please.
Excuse me.
The question is very simply, who pays tariffs, Mr. Chairman? I'd like him to answer that question.
Well,
He wants to answer other questions.
Well, Congressman, if the exporters, they dislike tariffs so much, why wouldn't they? If I think what you're trying to get me to say.
Did you remember the question? I'm not sure you did. Who pays tariffs?
It's a very complicated question.
Reclaiming my time. People pay tariffs, right? Reclaiming my time, Mr. Secretary. Reclaiming my time, Mr. Secretary. Reclaiming my time. You clearly aren't going to answer. I'm not going to waste my time having you go, Mr. Secretary, reclaiming, Mr. Chairman, I asked reclaiming my time.
Tariffs.
Mr. Chairman. And I asked to reclaim my time. Did I not? No, I said reclaiming my time because he's clearly not answering it. So, yeah, so as a small business owner, and unfortunately I'd like that time back since you failed to recognize me for 30 seconds. So I just recently from one of my suppliers got the tariff surcharge on things. And in addition to the tariff surcharge, guess what else got raised? American-made walnut plaques. That has nothing to do with tariffs, but companies take advantage and do that. So right now, we are getting screwed right and left because of the indiscriminate use of tariffs. That's the reality for Main Street. And you go off to Beverly Hills for private investor conferences and talk about crazy Ivan theories. Answer that. What is the crazy Ivan theory of tariffs that you mentioned at the summit?
Well, first of all, sir, I've had meetings with more than 50 small lenders. So I want to clarify that. I would also say that in game theory, strategic uncertainty, of which you seem to like the name Crazy Ivan.
Well, it's your words, correct? Didn't you use Crazy Ivan at the...
Well, you've used it 5 times, And
Answer the question, Mr. Chairman.
I am saying the strategic uncertainty is part of negotiations. That should we say,
Okay,
here's what we'll accept. Please take this.
Okay, I've got your answer. Thank you. I'm going to reclaim my time again. So for a small business, we don't have that luxury, right? When the ports are empty in California and we can't get goods and people are stocking up for Christmas goods, Crazy Ivan is great for, please don't take this offense, really rich people like you, but for people like me, it's not, right? That's what makes small businesses fail. That's what makes people lose their jobs. That's what makes the stock market tank. So I'll ask one more time, who pays tariffs?
Sir, the history would show that it is a complicated mix of who pays the tariffs over various times.
So that's exactly the problem. If your answer, and you are a very educated person, you have a very impressive bio, cannot answer the question who pays tariffs because you won't answer that, and you say it's a complicated issue, it's not complicated. Consumers pay Trump's tariff tax. That's the reality.
Congressman Mark Pocan, Democrat from Wisconsin, questioning Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent at today's Appropriations Subcommittee hearing. The secretary was also asked about when the U.S. would hit the debt ceiling and not be able to borrow any more money without the law being changed. It's known as the X date. He said there's not an estimate yet, but one will be forthcoming, and the debt ceiling is on the warning track. He also said the U.S. will not default on its debt. This is Washington Today. Congressional Republicans plan to include a debt ceiling increase in their budget reconciliation bill they're still putting together, the one with tax cuts and spending cuts, border security money, money for defense spending, promotion of energy. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, gave a status report today.
We're really excited. We're very encouraged this morning. I mean, I'm so thankful to have such a team that's worked so hard. I began the House Republican Conference meeting this morning with all the House Republicans by congratulating and thanking all of our committee chairs. I mean, they worked so hard around the clock. And we've been doing this for almost a year, as we've said many times in here. And all the committee members who were so disciplined in getting the work done. I mean, they had 10, 12-hour hearings in some of these committees, some even longer. And they got the product done and through the process. So by the end of this week, we'll have 8 of the 11 committees of jurisdiction will have done their work. And then next week, we will have Ways and Means, Energy and Commerce, and Ag. And some of you reported, or some of your outlets reported anyway, over the weekend that this was somehow a snag in the process, that those 3 committees were going next week instead of this week. But as I've explained to a few of you individually, I'll just say here together in the room, we went last Thursday to the White House, as the leader mentioned. Steve Scalise and I and Chairman Guthrie and Chairman Smith met in the White House with the president and his whole team on point. We had Secretary Bessent there from Treasury. We had Russ Vogt from Office of Management and Budget. We had his whole Leg Affairs team and Susie Wiles, the Chief of Staff, and Stephen Miller and the whole group. And the intention was to work through some of the final details, but we realized that we were still awaiting some key numbers on calculations on some of the provisions with tax and some of the other details. And it just made sense for us to push pause for a week to make sure that we do this right. We didn't want to move this quickly, speed for the sake of speed. We want to get it right. And so everybody in the room agreed that it made sense for us to do that. And so we pushed those 3 committees that are going next week just off another week, so we can make sure that we have the right equilibrium point on all the key issues. And I'm absolutely convinced we're going to do that, and I'm excited about it. So we'll stay on track. They'll do that next week, and by the end of the week, as Steve said, Leader Scalise said, we'll have our 11 committees. We'll send them by the end of next week to the Budget Committee, and Chairman Arrington then and his team will take that and merge it all together, and we'll have the one big, beautiful bill ready to go. We can pass that by Memorial Day. That was our original time frame. And some of the people in this room balked and thought that would be impossible, but stop doubting us. We're going to get this job done, okay?
House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, at a news conference today with other House Republican leaders. It's a story from Axios. Senate Republicans will huddle at the Library of Congress on Wednesday to discuss where things stand with President Trump's one big, beautiful bill. Axios has learned conservatives are demanding a minimum of $1 trillion in spending cuts. Moderates are refusing to take a hatchet to Medicaid. Trump keeps adding new tax priorities, and the clock is ticking. The Senate is largely waiting on the House right now. There is a big question on whether Senate committees will make changes to whatever the House sends over, or whether Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, will do so on the floor. That's the story from Axios. House Democratic leaders held their own news conference today about the budget reconciliation package that's being assembled without their input. Here is the leader, Hakeem Jeffries of New York.
House Republicans are determined to jam a reckless and extreme budget down the throats of the American people that will enact the largest cut to Medicaid and the largest cut to SNAP in American history. Children, families, women, veterans, older Americans, people with disabilities, and everyday Americans will be hurt. These proposed cuts to Medicaid and SNAP are unacceptable, unconscionable, and un-American. Several so-called swing seat and moderate Republicans have indicated that they are opposed to these devastating proposed cuts to SNAP and Medicaid. House Democrats earlier today, led by Brendan Boyle in terms of the discharge petition, and Frank Pallone and Angie Craig as it relates to the underlying legislation, hands off Medicaid and SNAP, have given Republicans an opportunity to actually not simply talk about defending the best interests of the American people, but be about it. The discharge petition is now live on the House floor. All we need are 4 Republicans to do the right thing, stand up for Medicaid and stand up for SNAP so they can stand up for the American people, and we can stop the devastating cuts that Republicans are proposing to the health care of the American people, and cuts that would literally take food out of the mouths of children and families. Hands off Medicaid and SNAP. I thank Frank Pallone, Angie Craig, and Brendan Boyle for their leadership on this effort. All we need are 4 House Republicans to join Democrats in protecting the health care and the nutritional assistance of the American people.
The House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, at a news conference today on Capitol Hill with other House Democrats. It's a story from Politico that explains what he was talking about. If 218 members sign the discharge petition, it would force a floor vote on a bill that would prevent the House from taking up bills under the party line reconciliation process that would cut Medicaid or SNAP. Members are generally reluctant to buck party leadership to sign discharge petitions, and GOP leaders have taken steps this Congress to block the process entirely. That's from the Politico article. From the Washington Examiner, senators on Tuesday voted to overturn Biden administration regulations limiting emissions from tire manufacturing, sending the resolution to President Donald Trump's desk for a signature. In a 55-45 vote, the Senate passed a resolution that would undo the Environmental Protection Agency's standards relating to hazardous air pollutants from rubber tire facilities. The bill passed the House in March, introduced by Congressman Morgan Griffith, Republican of Virginia, and advanced through the Congressional Review Act, which provides an expedited process for Congress to cancel rules, bypassing the filibuster in the Senate. That's from the Washington Examiner article. The Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, spoke in favor of the bill before the vote.
The Biden EPA's rubber tire rule set new emission standards for tire manufacturers. Why? Well, that's a good question. Tire manufacturers are already subject to strict emissions rules. And the Biden EPA, that's right, the Biden EPA found the rule was not necessary to protect public health or the environment. And as for the rule's effect on emissions, while it will reduce the emission of certain air pollutants, it will increase emissions of carbon dioxide and methane. And then there's the cost. The Biden EPA estimated that this rule would cost tire manufacturers $13.3 million per year. And there's reason to believe that that number could go much higher. So we have costly new standards for tire manufacturers justified by no public health benefit, including, as I said, by the Biden administration, and estimated to produce extremely dubious, if any, environmental gains. You might say we have the poster child for a burdensome and unnecessary government regulation, and we're going to repeal it this week.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, on the Senate floor. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat of Rhode Island, opposed the bill.
The full story here is that the economic effects of this rule are minimal. EPA found during its rulemaking process that facility owners affected by this rule will incur less than 1% of their revenue in compliance costs. 1%. That's too much, obviously, for our friends on the other side. The rule even offers flexible compliance options that could further reduce the burden if a company were to make an honest effort to come into compliance with air rules that protect the safety of their own communities. In any event, that minimal 1% or less financial burden ought to be outweighed by the substantial public health costs that Americans will face if Congress and the Trump administration continue their mad quest to eliminate clean air protections. More doctor's appointments and emergency room visits, more inhalers and prescriptions, more lost school and work days. That will be the cost of passing this resolution. So I urge all of my colleagues to protect the health of Americans and vote no on this misguided resolution.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat from Rhode Island, on the Senate floor before the Senate passed this bill to send it to President Trump for his signature into law. The vote was 55 to 45. Senate today also confirmed Frank Bisignano, president and CEO of Fiserv, a financial technology company, to be Social Security Commissioner. That vote was 53 to 47. Wall Street today, the Dow down 389, NASDAQ down 154, S&P down 43. Washington today continues in a moment.
If you ever miss any of C-SPAN's coverage, you can find it anytime online at cspan.org. Videos of key hearings, debates, and other events feature markers that guide you to interesting and newsworthy highlights. These points of interest markers appear on the right-hand side of your screen when you hit play on select videos. This timeline tool makes it easy to quickly get an idea of what was debated and decided in Washington. Scroll through and spend a few minutes on C-SPAN's points of interest.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem testified today before the House Appropriations Subcommittee that oversees her department. TheHill.com writes the hearing comes as the White House faces backlash over the case involving Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador in March, deportation flights using the 1798 Alien Enemies Act, and President Trump's recent offer to pay migrants $1,000 to self-deport. It also follows the administration's fight with higher education institutions such as Harvard University and perceived targeting of international students, including funding cuts. That was all from The Hill. Here's part of the hearing. Congresswoman Lauren Underwood, Democrat from Illinois, the ranking member of the subcommittee, asking the secretary about due process for migrants.
Do you believe that the Constitution grants everyone in our country the right to due process, including non-citizens?
The administration has the authority to.
Ma'am, I'm looking for a yes or no question. Yes or no. Do you believe the Constitution? Yes, ma'am. Do you,
we have not conducted
reclaiming my time, Mr. Chairman. Time is yours. Okay. Secretary Noem, I'm just looking for a yes or no here. Do you believe the Constitution guarantees due process to everyone in America?
Due process is exactly what this Congress lays out.
Yes or no? Okay, ma'am, I'll take that as a no.
On due process.
Excuse me, I'm trying to ascertain your understanding of the law as it applies to your department, and you as its leader should be able to give us a yes or no answer, because judge after judge has ruled that the law is not being followed. Do you believe that the U.S. government has the authority to deport American citizens?
No, and we are not deporting
great.
U.S. citizens.
I'm so happy to hear that you do not believe that the law gives you that authority, because the federal government has no authority under U.S. laws to deport any American citizen. And as I know, everyone viewing this hearing today knows that several American citizens have been deported to date.
That is not
Secretary
true.
Noem, that was not a question. Secretary Noem, that oath that we both swore before taking office was to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, not the president, not a political party, the Constitution.
Congresswoman Lauren Underwood, Democrat from Illinois, Appropriations Subcommittee ranking member, questioning the witness, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. New York Times article, a newly declassified memo released on Monday, confirms that U.S. intelligence agencies rejected a key claim President Trump put forth to justify invoking a wartime statute to summarily deport Venezuelans to a prison in El Salvador. The memo, dovetailing with intelligence findings first reported by the New York Times in March, states that spy agencies do not believe that the administration of Venezuelan's president, Nicolas Maduro, controls a criminal gang, Tren de Aragua. That determination contradicts what Mr. Trump asserted when he invoked the deportation law, the Alien Enemies Act. That was from the New York Times. More from today's subcommittee hearing. Congressman Tom Cole, Republican of Oklahoma, chairs the full committee, asking Secretary Noem about the Trump administration's deportation priorities.
In your service, you've prioritized detaining and removing literally the worst of the worst in our country that have arrived here illegally, including those that have committed violent crimes against our fellow Americans. I think we're all in support of that effort. Can you tell us, and you may not have this information, I'm just curious, how many illegal aliens have committed serious offenses against our own citizens?
Yeah, there are tens of thousands of illegal aliens that have committed crimes against individuals in this country, and we have worked very hard to make sure that those are the individuals that we're going after and deporting as soon as possible. There have been over 160,000 repatriations targeting these individuals, returning them back to their home countries and facing consequences and legal action because of that. President Trump has told us to make these individuals a priority and to also make sure that we're identifying those with final removal orders to remove. And overwhelmingly, the American people have supported this. One of the things that I would say is that was unfortunate was the Biden administration closed an office within ICE that helped us better track criminal activity by illegal aliens and to give resources to those families, to let them be informed on when cases were in court, if the perpetuator of their crime was going to be released, if they were in custody. The Voices office within ICE was opened under the first Trump administration, and President Biden closed that office, I believe, to cover up exactly how many crimes were committed against people in this country by illegal aliens. We have reopened that office. We believe that that data would be helpful, and they're continuing to work with people who have been victims of illegal crimes and illegal alien activity in this country. But those data and that information, I don't think we'll ever truly know how much crime was committed and how many were committed against American citizens because the Biden administration refused to track those victims and those crimes as they were perpetuated.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem taking a question from Congressman Tom Cole, Republican from Oklahoma, Appropriations Committee chair at a subcommittee hearing on the department's budget. There's a story from Fox News. Attorney General Pam Bondi said Tuesday that authorities have made one of the biggest fentanyl busts in U.S. history with the seizure of 11.5 kilos of the drug, including 3 million pills. Bondi said that around 35 kilos of methamphetamine, 7.5 kilos of cocaine, and 4.5 kilos of heroin were also seized, along with $5 million in cash and 49 rifles and pistols. 16 people, including 3 women, were arrested in the operation. 6 of the males are in the U.S. illegally, Bondi said, reporting from Fox News. Another issue that came up at today's hearing with the Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was Real ID. That's the more secure state-issued identification, most often a driver's license. And it takes effect Wednesday, required for regular boarding of commercial airplanes. The Secretary told the subcommittee that 81% of travelers already have Real ID. And if you don't have one, she said you'll be able to fly, but be prepared for extra security. Here are some questions about this from Congressman Cole.
I want to commend you. You mentioned in your statement about, pushing on the Real ID Act. I know that's not an easy thing to do. And I'm sure when the day comes, about 30% of the people, as I understand it, that travel still don't have that documentation. Amongst the things you have to consider are what kinds of IDs are acceptable. I would encourage you, as you do that, to look carefully at tribal IDs. I know certainly in South Dakota, but in Oklahoma, we have a lot of our citizens that use those as primary sources, and clearly they need to meet the standards you lay out. But whatever you could do in that regard to both keep those folks informed and work with them so they get into compliance would be very appreciated.
We do. Tomorrow is the day that Real ID will finally be enforced. It's been a law that's been in place for over 20 years. 81% of the travelers that travel by airline in the United States today are already compliant. So they have IDs that already they will be able to use just like they normally always have been. We will be honoring passports, other federally recognized IDs. Tribal IDs will be recognized. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that. And what will happen tomorrow is folks will come through the line and will be issue their ID and show it. If it's not compliant, they may be diverted to a different line, have an extra step, but people will be allowed to fly. We recognize that this is a security issue. Congress has had many, many years to reevaluate it and decide if they wanted to change the law or to stop it. And the Biden administration chose that it should go into place on May 7th, and we intend to follow the law. So we will make sure that it is as seamless as possible and that travelers will get to stay on their intended itinerary, but we are telling people that this law will be enforced and it will allow us to know individuals in this country who they are and that they're authorized to travel.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem questioned by Congressman Tom Cole, Republican from Oklahoma, at today's oversight hearing of the Homeland Security Department budget. Real ID was recommended by the 9/11 Commission, which investigated the 2001 terror attacks. Originally scheduled to be implemented in 2008, delayed several times until now. As the Secretary said, Real ID goes into effect Wednesday, May 7th. The Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, is calling for an investigation into what's been happening at Newark Liberty International Airport in New Jersey. Last week, air traffic controllers lost communication, and there have been hundreds of delayed planes. Senator Schumer spoke today on the Senate floor in Washington.
What was the culprit of this blackout? It was a burnt copper wire that shut communications down. This is unacceptable. We can't keep America's planes safe in 2025 if we rely on copper wires and floppy disks. Our air traffic controllers and America's travelers deserve far more. Copper wires, floppy disks, 2025, when it comes to safety, the FAA is way behind the 8 ball. Yesterday, I called on the Office of the Inspector General at the FAA to conduct a full investigation into the deteriorating conditions at Newark Airport and to examine how we can prevent these problems from spreading to other airports around the country. When Newark alone gets backed up, it affects other airports because it's such a busy hub. But if this starts happening at other airports, our air travel is in real trouble, even more trouble than it is now. Donald Trump's FAA has failed spectacularly this year in showing the American people that the Trump administration is up to the task of keeping people safe. We need to get to the bottom as to why. The public deserves answers to some very important questions. Why has the staffing shortages at Newark and other critical airports been allowed to continue? What role has DOGE cuts played in aggravating the chaos? What is the plan to fill the vacancies of critical leadership at the FAA? Some of the top positions are not filled because some of the people there who were very capable resigned in disgust at what the administration was trying to do to the FAA. We have seen chaos throughout the administration, and clearly it's here at the FAA, an agency that cannot afford any chaos whatsoever, because lives are at stake. The longer the FAA and the administration slow walk these troubles, the greater the risk of a true catastrophe.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, on the Senate floor. The Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy spoke to reporters today outside the White House.
Obviously, there's a lot of coverage right now about what's happening in Newark in the airspace. Want to just talk about a couple things as background. So the air traffic control system that we use today is anywhere from 25 to 50 years old. We have copper wires, not fiber. We use radar that is, 1983 vintage at the earliest. A lot of it's 1970s, some of it even earlier than that. Radios also incredibly antiquated. And so this is not a new problem. We've known this problem has existed. There's been multiple GAO reports over the last 4 years saying you have real problems with air traffic control and you should do something with it before it actually fails. So think about this. The last administration spent $1.2 trillion. The largest infrastructure package ever known to man, they spent, Joe Biden signed right here at this White House. And how much was spent to rebuild air traffic control? $5 billion. And of the $5 billion that was spent or was given, only $1 billion was actually spent. So they have made no investments in the system that we now see having issues in Newark. On top of that, they were focused on things like racist roads. They literally spent time concerned about the word cockpit and changing cockpit to flight deck. It's not funny, that's actually what they spent time on. Or airmen to aeronaut. And so now this administration has come in, and it was shortly after the DC air crash that I started to look at the air traffic control system. And very quickly, I saw one piece of the pie where there was issues, and then scratched further, and there's another piece of the pie. And as we looked at it, we see that the whole system needs to be redone. We need to build a brand new air traffic control system. And it was about 6 weeks ago, I presented that plan to the president. The president has signed off on this plan. I've been working with OMB and others inside the White House. We're going to roll out this infrastructure proposal on this Thursday. We have 47 groups that are going to come. We have unions, we have the industry, we have trade groups, we have the families from the air crash on the 29th of January are going to come. We have legislators. This is bipartisan. You have Democrats and Republicans. All of you fly. All of our families fly, and they want to make sure when they do fly, they can fly safely. And so, specifically in regard to Newark, we've slowed down the traffic, right? So, safety is our mission, right? Efficiency is not. We love efficiency, but safety is critical for us. And so, if we feel like there's issues in the airspace, we'll slow it down. And when you lose your scope or you lose communication with airplanes, automatically you're going to slow it down. If you're driving down the freeway at 70 miles an hour and someone throws a bucket of white paint on your windshield, what do? You slow down. We slow it down.
Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy outside the White House with reporters. He also said the initial reports that the outage last week at Newark Airport of 90 seconds was a little long. He said he believes it was more like 30 seconds. From NBC News, Senator Thom Tillis, Republican from North Carolina, said he would not support Ed Martin, President Donald Trump's nominee for U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, likely blocking the path to confirmation for the Stop the Steal organizer, who had closely aligned himself with January 6 defendants. Tillis is a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, which is overseeing Martin's nomination. The panel is 12 Republicans and 10 Democrats, meaning if all other members aside from Tillis voted along party lines, the vote on Martin would end in a tie and the nomination would not be reported favorably to the full Senate. That was from NBC News. Senator Tillis spoke with reporters in the hallway of a Senate office building.
I don't believe he's being advanced to the markup. I met with Mr. Martin. He seems like a good man. Most of my concerns related to January 6th, and he built a compelling case on some of the 15-12 prosecutions that were probably heat of the moment bad decisions, but where we probably have a difference is I think anybody that breached the perimeter should have been in prison for some period of time. Whether it's 30 days or 3 years is debatable, but I have no tolerance for anybody who entered the building on January the 6th, and that's probably where most of the friction was.
I see. So he disagreed with you on that?
Well, no, I have to say that Mr. Martin did a good job of explaining how there were people that probably got caught up in it, but they made the stupid decision to come through a building that had been breached and that the police officers and others were saying stay away. So the difference wasn't that they should be charged, in my estimation, it's by how much. That's an argument I'm willing to have, but we have to be very, very clear that what happened on January the 6th was wrong. It wasn't, it was not prompted or created by other people to put those people in trouble. They made a stupid decision, and they disgraced the United States by absolutely destroying the Capitol, and I can't have any patience for
It sounds like your concerns were not abbreviated.
But let me be very clear, though. Mr. Martin did a good job of explaining the one area that I think he's probably right, that there were some people that were over-prosecuted. But there were some, 200 or 300 of them, that should have never gotten a pardon, and he agreed with that. But the disagreement there had more to do. If Mr. Martin were being put forth as a U.S. attorney for any district except the district where January 6th happened, the protest happened, I'd probably support him, but not in this district.
When you say he's not being advanced to the markup, was he operating under that understanding that he's not being advanced through to a markup?
Well, I think Mr. Martin, I'm sure they're looking through it. I mean, be clear, some of the deadline has to do with the length of time he can operate as acting, and the administration can work through that if they want to have more time and potentially work them through. But at this point, I've indicated to the White House I wouldn't support his nomination.
Has Trump called you yet on this?
Mr. President, the President and I talk all the time.
Senator Tom Tillis, Republican from North Carolina, speaking to reporters today on Capitol Hill. Ed Martin's position as interim U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia expires May 20th. Story from USA Today. Following Tillis's comments Tuesday, the White House indicated it was sticking by Martin. White House Principal Deputy Communications Director Alex Pfeiffer told USA Today in a statement, Ed Martin is a fantastic U.S. Attorney for D.C. and will continue to implement the president's law and order agenda in Washington. He is the right man for the job, and we look forward to his confirmation. Story from the Washington Examiner. A new report from the House Intelligence Committee found that the FBI completely mishandled its investigation into the 2017 shooting at a congressional baseball game practice in Washington, D.C. The 27-page report released Tuesday is the culmination of an oversight investigation into the attack in which 4 people were shot, including 2 Capitol Police officers, and now Majority Leader Steve Scalise, Republican from Louisiana. The report criticizes the FBI's handling of the investigation, as the agency initially characterized the event as suicide by cop before admitting years later it was a domestic terrorism incident. Intelligence Committee Chair Rick Crawford, Republican of Arkansas, accused the FBI of acting with a complete disregard and lack of investigative integrity during a Tuesday morning press conference. That was from the Washington Examiner. At a separate news conference, Congressman Scalise was asked about the report.
I saw your statement expressing some concerns after you read the report. You're asking the FBI director to look into that. What exactly are your concerns, and how high do you think that this went at the FBI?
So if you go back to 2017, after the baseball shooting, the FBI had brought in the members of the team. Roger Williams was one of those members who was part of that briefing. And at that meeting, they went through some of the information. Some of it was classified, some of it wasn't. But they ultimately let us know what their conclusion was. And that's when they said it was classified as suicide by cop. And I'll tell you, I was offended. I think all of us there were highly offended that that was the conclusion that the FBI in 2017 came to, because it wasn't what happened on the baseball field. He went there with the intention of killing all of us on the baseball field, and he had a list in his pocket of other Republicans he wanted to kill. It was very politically motivated, and it was clear they suppressed a lot of facts. And what the FBI report that Kash Patel's FBI came out with today shows they suppressed factual evidence to reach a different conclusion than what the facts led to show. Suicide by cop was not the conclusion. They ultimately changed it to domestic terrorism. And I applaud the new FBI for making that change in the justification. But they also revealed some of the other facts that were suppressed. The fact that it was politically motivated, even though they had some of that factual evidence, they hid that because they didn't want to make it look like it was politically motivated. Look, the guy went there and not only tried to kill all of us. I had 2 Capitol Police officers with me on my detail. He tried to kill both of them. Suicide by cop is not when you try to kill everybody around, including the cops. And by the way, he didn't even know they were cops because they were dressed in plain clothes. And he had every intention of carrying out a politically motivated message. He wrote about it, and they had that evidence, and they suppressed it. So it was very disappointing. We walked out of the meeting that day because we were so infuriated that that was their conclusion. I'm glad that Kash Patel is getting the FBI back to a fact-based organization where they follow the evidence, not try to have a pre-disclosed conclusion, but where they actually look at the facts and make their conclusion based on the evidence. That's what he's done with this new report. And I think it's important that they got it right. It's also important that they find out who the people were that suppressed evidence for a political motivated reason.
Congressman Steve Scalise, the House Majority Leader, Republican from Louisiana, at a news conference. From Reuters, President Donald Trump said on Tuesday that the U.S. will stop bombing the Houthis in Yemen after the Iran-aligned group agreed to stop interrupting important shipping lanes in the Middle East. In an Oval Office meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, Trump announced the Houthis have said they no longer want to fight, but did not elaborate on the message. There was no immediate response from the Houthis. That was from the Reuters article. Here's President Trump, and you'll also hear from Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
We had some very good news last night. The Houthis have announced that they are not, or they've announced to us at least, that they don't want to fight anymore. They just don't want to fight. And we will honor that. And we will stop the bombings. And they have capitulated. But more importantly, we will take their word. They say they will not be blowing up ships anymore. And that's what the purpose of what we were doing. So that's just news. We just found out about that. So I think that's very, very positive. They were knocking out a lot of ships going, as you know, sailing beautifully down the various seas. It wasn't just the canal. It was a lot of other places. And I will accept their word, and we are going to stop the bombing of the Houthis, effective immediately. And Marco, you'll let everybody know that, okay? Do you have something to say about that, by the way? It's a pretty big announcement.
Yeah, this was always a freedom of navigation mission. These guys, these are, a band of individuals with advanced weaponry that were threatening global shipping. And the job was to get that to stop. And if it's going to stop, then we can stop. And I think it's an important development.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio and President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office. Oman's Foreign Minister, Badr al-Busaidi, said in an online statement following recent discussions and contacts with the aim of de-escalation, efforts have resulted in a ceasefire agreement between the two sides, and it would ensure freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. Story from ABC News. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled Wednesday the Trump administration can move forward with a ban on transgender military service members for now, lifting a lower court injunction against the policy after a judge ruled it was an unsupported, dramatic, and facially unfair exclusionary policy. The court did not explain its decision other than to say the order would expire if the justices ultimately take up the case on the merits and issue a ruling striking it down. Litigation continues in the Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. Justices Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, and Ketanji Brown Jackson indicated they would have denied Trump's request for a stay. That was from ABC News. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth spoke today at the Global SOF Foundation Special Operations Force Week in Tampa, Florida, about his calls to restore the warrior ethos in the Defense Department.
Humans more important than hardware. Everything starts and ends with warriors from training to the battlefield. We are leaving wokeness and weakness behind. No more pronouns, no more climate change obsession, no more emergency vaccine mandates, no more dudes in dresses. We're done with that. We're focused on lethality, meritocracy, accountability, standards, and readiness.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth today at Special Operations Force Week in Tampa, Florida. It's a story from CNN that the Defense Secretary has ordered senior Pentagon leadership to cut the number of four-star generals and admirals by at least 20% across the military. according to a memo signed by Hegseth, dated Monday and obtained by CNN. In the memo, Hegseth wrote that the cuts are a critical step toward removing redundant force structure to optimize and streamline leadership by reducing excess general and flag officer positions. Senator Jack Reed, the top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee, questioned Hegseth's rationale for the cuts and warned dismissing top officers without sound justification would cripple the military, reporting from CNN. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.